Alright, today our video is focused on I can add and subtract decimals. And I think you'll find that this one is pretty straightforward because it's very similar, almost exactly the same as adding and subtracting integers or our whole numbers. So it'll be very similar. I can estimate and measure lengths using metric units. And remember, metric units are based on meters. So if meter is the base unit, then we can get smaller by going to a decimeter, a centimeter, and even smallest, a millimeter. And bigger, we can go all the way up to a kilometer or a kilometer. The first thing I want to visualize is a number line to add and subtract decimals. So here we have a decimal number line. Actually, it's just a number line right now, and it starts at 0 and it goes up to 1. So every number on here is going to be between 0 and 1. And as you can see, I've divided it equally into 10 equal pieces. So each part of that will be 1/10. 1 out of 10 of a whole, so 1/10. So in decimal notation, it looks like this: 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and we read these 0 and 1/10, 0 and 2/10, 0 and 3/10. And we also know that there are even smaller units. In between each of these tenths is going to be 10 more lines for hundredths. So let's zoom in right here and label them hundredths. So as you can see, I've split it into 10 more equal pieces. So this is now between 0 and 0 and 1/10. So each of these small spots, these small marks, represent 1/100th. So you can see here's 0 and 1/100th, 2/100ths, 3/100ths, 4/100ths, 5/100ths, 6/100ths, 7/100ths, 8/100ths, 9/100ths. And if I get to 10/100ths, if I put a 0 there, that's the same as 1/10. So we could write this as 0 and 10/100ths. It's the same number. We're going to go a little bigger. I'm not going to make all of the small marks because it would take a really long time. But I'm going to go up to in between 0 and 4/10 and 0 and 5/10. So if we look closely here, in between 0 and 4/10 and 0 and 5/10, we have 10 more numbers, and these are all hundredths. And if you notice, in the tenths place of each of these, what number do we see? We see the number 4, the digit 4. So each of these has 4/10, and then it also has some hundredths, some extra hundredths, and all the way up to 5/10, which we could also write as 0 and 50/100ths. And we could write this as 0 and 40/100ths. We can see that the tenths place is the same, and we just put a 0 on the end to change the name of it, but it is the same number. So let's pretend we had the problem 4/10 plus 0 and 3/10, 0 and 4/100ths plus 0 and, oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading all these numbers wrong. I hope you caught that. Let's read this number: 0 and 4/10 in the tenths place plus 0 and 3/100ths in the hundredths place. So if I started right here and I circled all the way from 0 to 4/10, that's where I started. And then it tells me I need to add on 3 more hundredths. So I could go 1, 2, 3, and I would end up right there at 0 and 43/100ths. Now let's pretend I wanted to subtract. Let's say the problem was this: 0 and 5/10 minus 0 and 3/100ths. So again, I would start all the way up to 5/10. That's what it tells me to do. Start at 5/10, and then subtract 3/100ths, and I would go backwards: 1, 2, 3/100ths, and I would end up at 0 and 47/100ths. Now we can easily visualize it that way, but it would take a long time to do that on a regular basis. So I could also write the problem like this: 0 and 4/10 plus 0 and 3/100ths. Notice, really, really important, I lined up my decimal points. I lined up my place values, my ones on top of my ones, my tenths on top of my tenths. But I'm also missing something. I'm missing a hundredths place here. And if I'm missing a hundredths place, I just put a 0 there, and it's the exact same number. Like we've already learned, 40 hundredths is the same as 4 tenths. So now I can do my addition. 0 plus 3 is 3, 4 plus 0 is 4, decimal point goes straight down, and I have my answer, 0 and 43 hundredths. Likewise, if I'm using subtraction, I can rewrite the problem vertically as well. So again, I've got 0 and 5 tenths minus 0 and 3 hundredths. Well, I'm missing that hundredths place up here, so I'm just going to fill it in with a 0. And now it's exactly the same as any subtraction you've ever done. I bring the decimal point straight down. I've lined them up. That's really, really important. Otherwise, I can't do my subtraction. And now I need to subtract as normal. So I do 0 minus 3, and I can't do that. So I need to ungroup. So instead of 5 tenths, now I have 4 tenths. And I cross this out, and that gives me 10 hundredths. Then I do 10 minus 3 is 7, 4 minus 0 is still 4, and 0 minus 0 is 0. The decimal point stays in the exact same spot. So I end up with the answer 0 and 47 hundredths, which, if you remember, is exactly what I got before. On this page today, the directions tell you to use your paper ruler to answer each question. And your paper ruler is found on the previous page, page 90. This is page 91, and then you'll also be looking at 92. This is going back to decimeters, meters, centimeters, millimeters, and so on. Back on this page again, remember to use your chart here as well as your paper ruler. Make sure you read the directions and focus on the patterns that you see down in this table.